everyone, and welcome to our first episode of the new quarter for Word on the Street. My name is Anissa Crow. I am one of the hosts, and I will now give it off to my other co-host.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I am Omar. I am the co-host of the Word on the Street podcast, a podcast here out of the Office of Multicultural Learning at Santa Clara University, where we explore just a variety of topics that I don't know how to fully explain. So you can just watch/listen to our previous episodes to get an idea of what we talk about. And for today, Anissa, I'm very excited. We're talking about one of my newest favorite movies, honestly, from Disney, Encanto. Very, very excited to talk about this movie.
Yes, and we have some lovely guests with us here today. Before we get into introducing everybody, I first want to talk about Encanto and share the tagline of the movie because I find this to be kind of funny because it's one sentence long. Of course, it's a tagline. And the synopsis, it is a young Colombian girl has to face frustration of being the only member of her family without magical powers. That's how they summarize the movie. So let's go ahead and get into more about what the movie's about and more of the themes that we saw as we each individually watched it. So first I'm going to hand it off to our first guest, Evelyn. Go ahead and share.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you, guys. Hi, everyone. My name is Evelyn. I'm currently a senior here at Santa Clara University, double majoring in political science and ethnic studies with a minor women and gender studies. And apart from that, I'm also a first generation college student. So I am part of the Lead Scholars program here. And apart from that, both of my parents are immigrants from Mexico. And so not only am I first generation college student, but I'm also a first generation citizen. And so that's a little bit about me. Anyone else can go after and introduce themselves.
Hi guys, I'm Jocelyn. Everyone calls me Josie though. I'm a sociology double major as well. I'm a junior and also part of the Lead Scholars program as first gen. Similar to Evelyn, basically everything. My parents immigrated from Mexico, and yeah. You want to go next, Antonio?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Antonio. I'm a junior here at Santa Clara. I'm double majoring in management and environmental studies. I'm Colombian. I was born in Bogota, and my family is all Colombian. We've immigrated a long time ago, many generations back to Colombia. I was born in Bogota, but then I moved away very young to Mexico City when I was like 3 years old, and I was raised there for most of my life. I also lived in Indonesia, and then I immigrated to the US. I've only lived here for 5 years, so I'm not a US citizen. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this movie. I really liked it a lot.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. I love when we have guests, and especially to share something about their background and how they connected to a film like this. One of our first episodes from last year, or last quarter, yeah, technically last year, we talked about representation in film and movies for specifically BIPOC individuals and LGBT plus identifying individuals. And it is kind of nice to come back and start the new quarter with, again, a topic of representation and maybe a more positive one this time, because that first one was real negative. And so I just want to kick it off, and just whoever would like to talk about their first initial reactions to the movie, like maybe when trailer came out, what were you thinking before it came out, and then also what you liked and maybe disliked about the film as well. So I'm going to hand it off to whoever would like to speak. Go ahead and just jump on it.
How about I kick things off
Thank you.
real quick, just to kind of talk about my first impression. So I actually saw it in the theaters with a few friends, and I think that was, I don't know if I would say a better experience, but I think it definitely would change how I view the movie if I had just watched it when it came out on Disney Plus on Christmas, because in the theater there was also one of the famous Disney shorts titled Far From the Tree, which was also a little bit about generational trauma, which also shows up in Encanto. And so it just fascinating to see, because it was like, first it was a sucker punch to the gut with the little short about these two raccoons, or this family of raccoons, I should say. And then heading over to Encanto, which is like an even bigger sucker punch, because then it's like the family's extended, the expectations are like tenfold, you know, mental health is running rampant and everything. But I personally, I think it is becoming one of my, like, or not one of, like, probably my favorite Disney movie up till now, just because of, I think the fantastic representation. I myself am not Colombian, but I am Latino, so I know that a lot of the themes present in the movie are honestly just present in a lot of real life Latino communities. And so, or Latina, I should say, Latina communities. And so, yeah, I don't know. I just very, very liked a lot of kind of minor details. One thing for me that I very, very much enjoyed, which a lot of people are kind of like, wow, is the lack of machismo, or just the lack of, you know, abusive, negligent fathers, because we have Felix and Agustin, which are just honestly in my mind icons, like top 10. I aspire to be like them when I grow up, you know, because it's rare. Kind of, again, speaking a little bit to our past episode on representation in media, it's always kind of been, you know, the absent father figure, very negligent or very, you know, angry, macho, abusive, like just a bunch of things that are never really put in a positive light. And I just very, very much enjoy that the movie like actually portrayed them, you know, in a way that wasn't like that. It felt very, very refreshing to me.
Something that just sparked in my mind when you were talking, Omar, was how in the film Luisa is the one with like the powerful, like she's the power one, like she's the strong one. And it's interesting because you would have, like within Latina communities, you would have assumed that it would have been gone to like a male character like Camilo, but Camilo's gift is like shape-shifting and like making people laugh. So that's just something that caught my attention, and that I didn't think about it previously, was that like they gave that strong power to Luisa instead.
Actually, kind of building off of that, I did notice that too. I actually recently read an article that talks about how that song is kind of a love letter to Lynn's older sister, and how she like kind of helped, like dealt with a lot of things so that he wouldn't have to, because he was she was the oldest. But I also think that it's really cool because it reflects on a part of like Latin culture, like Latina culture that I think is like very ignored, which is kind of the role of like older sisters in Latina families. And it's crazy. I read this article. Well, I did a lot of readings from Anzaldúa in this other class that I took a couple quarters ago. And one of them just really talks about like the disparity within the Latin family of how like men are treated and how women are treated, and how so much of like the responsibility is placed on older sisters. And I think that that is like super reflective and something that really doesn't appear a lot in movies. So I really appreciated that part specifically that you mentioned, Evelyn.
Think we lost Jocelyn. I don't remember if she had to leave early or not. But either way, just going back to the oldest sister and like that role that we see in Luisa and Isabella. So I am the oldest sister. I am the oldest in my family of a Latinx background, specifically Mexican. I'm actually mixed, so my dad is where I get my Mexican side, and my mom is Portuguese and Irish. But it's like before the movie even came out, or I didn't get to watch it in theaters, but my sister did. And she just kept sending me repeatedly on TikTok, or just the song individually of Surface Pressure, the one that Luisa sings. And every time it would just bring me to tears, because I was like, this was how I felt growing up as the oldest child, having all these pressures, having to face all these things and not look like you're being weak, not look like you can't handle it, because what are you going to do if you can't? You're supposed to be the backbone. You're supposed to take care of everybody. So that Luisa's character in that way spoke to me a lot. In that song, I I can hear one line from it and start tearing up, and I can't. And the fact that my youngest sibling, my sister, was the one sending it to me, so she is my Mirabelle. I could not stop crying. So when I finally watched the movie, I was like, you have to stop doing this. I am going to mentally break. This movie is beautiful. Please stop sending me that song. It hurts my feelings.
That is so interesting. I am actually the middle child, but my older sister, she, hasn't really been, she's not really attached to her family, and she's kind of done her own things. And so although I'm not the oldest, I've taken up the responsibility of being the oldest in my family because I have a younger sibling. So like I'm the first ever in my immediate family to go to college. And so that sets up a different expectation in the household because your parents are like expecting you, or not expecting you, but they're really relying on you. And another thing too is like I come from a low socioeconomic status. So growing up, I had to work very young at the age of 13 and 14 to like start like helping my mother, who like at that time became single, and I had to like start picking up things. So like a lot of it too is like doesn't necessarily have to be the oldest sibling, but the one that like takes the responsibility when other siblings kind of decide to wander off and do their own things. And so I felt myself being torn between like relating to Luisa and also Isabella. I feel like Isabella's character, at first, I'm not gonna lie, I did not like her because I was like, oh, she's like supposed to be the perfect one, like whatever. But when I like started like really thinking about it, and like I've watched Encanto like so many times, so like each time that I watch it, it's like a different perspective that I have of Isabella. And I think it's just, she's expected to be perfect, and she's always expected to be like very feminine and floral. And she's expected to marry this guy that she doesn't actually want to marry. So like it just it's interesting because Luisa's supposed to like is the oldest and is supposed to like carry like the burdens and like handle all of that, whereas Isabella is still designated as like the perfect token child.
So this is actually really interesting. Actually, Isabela is the oldest one. I was looking
Wait,
into
is
an
she?
article. Yeah, I was looking into an article. Because I was like just thinking about the timeline, how it's like you get the door at 5 years old and then flash forward like yada yada. But most of these characters, like I think especially the grandchildren, are really young. I thought they were all like much older, but I think it was like Isabela is 21 years old, so is Dolores. So those two are the oldest. Then it's followed by Luisa, who is barely 19. And like that was shocking to me. I was like, she's doing so much already. And then it's followed by both Camilo and Mirabel being 15 years old. I really thought that like Mirabel was at least like 18, and like just shocking to find out. And then finally, of course, Antonio is 5 years old because that's when he's getting his gift. So yeah, Isabela is the oldest one. And I was like, I was shocked because I really thought Luisa was
because like even in like their family portraits too, it's like Luisa's the first one, and then Isabella in the middle, and then Mirabel. So that's why I was like confused about that. But that's so interesting.
Yeah, going in, I also thought the same thing. I thought Luisa was the oldest, and like it matters, but it doesn't, in the way that because as the oldest sibling, I connected to her character the most. But also, I'm doing a timeline now. So Bruno was gone for a decade, or he wasn't gone. He was in the house. He was living in the walls. That makes because now that Omar has said the ages, I didn't know everybody's ages, so I just was like, maybe it's only been like 5 or something, definitely not 5, but trying to figure out the timeline of how long he was living in the wall with the rats. And of course, that is why he made amazing telenovelas with the rats. So yeah, just thinking of that timeline too, and just like those, it kind of makes more sense to me that Mirabel is and Camilo are 15, because it kind of matches that developmental okay, so also I'm a psychology major in undergrad. I'm currently a grad student studying counseling psychology, but her age and mindset is, when you're a teenager, it's very individualized, so she only sees the world and only how she is affected in it. So it makes sense now, in addition to like being a part of Latinx culture and like not really like knowing what your older siblings are doing, but also just like not being focused enough to reach your brain into other people's worldview and how your family works in that way.
I like how you brought up that point because I remember how after Bruno had like his second vision, me and Bella went to go hug Isabela, and she was just doing that because like she saw it already happening. Like she knew she had to do it in regards to like keeping El Encanto alive. But then when she goes, she has like this unexpected conversation with Isabela about like how she's like positioned as like the perfect golden child. And then like that kind of reminded me of that, how like at first Mirabel was going for like the interest of like saving herself and saving the Encanto and saving the family. But then she left with the realization of like knowing her sister at a more deeper level.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Eleven. Jocelyn, is there anything that you would like to add about it?
Yeah, sorry. But what you were saying about like the psych thing, I was going to say something earlier, kind of psyche, and I didn't want to like do anything. But how Luisa was like was not apparently the oldest child, Isabela was. But sometimes it doesn't really matter like biologically what age you are, it matters like socially. So if your oldest sibling is not there, and like how you were saying, Evelyn, too, if your oldest sibling isn't there, basically the responsibilities of the oldest sibling and like that role of basically being more responsible and being more of like kind of a parent falls onto the next sibling. So basically the sibling that is there and has like the most responsibility and strength and stuff. It's more of a social thing, not really about age. So I thought that was interesting because I also thought Luisa was the oldest one, but yeah.
That actually brings up a very interesting, I don't know if I call it like a topic, but just a very interesting idea from the movie, like kind of speaking about social expectations and stuff like that. Because the thing that I was thinking about, and I TikTok, I saw a TikTok about this, and it just like it sent me spiraling. Was essentially about how, you know, in the little village that, you know, everyone's living in the movie, the Madrigal family is essentially royalty. Because like they are the ones that hold the power. They're the ones that hold the candle that, you know, holds the miracle that, you know, made the entire thing possible. And then also all of the powers are like handed down through generations, because we see, you know, the triplets get it and then their children get it, and so it's like it's passed down. And then like with Isabela, who's supposed to marry Mariano, Abuela is constantly talking about like, oh, so good for the Encanto, like so many good like new gifts, new grandbabies and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but I just thought it was very like interesting to note. And then also one question as well, kind of thinking on that for you all. I've also noticed within the movie and the like hundreds of times that I've watched it up to this point, that there is a lot of emphasis on the family as its own entity. So it's like, even when Abuela talks, like, oh, so good for the family, like I was thinking of the family, like you should have thought about the family. Like the family as a whole is seen as its own character. So I was wondering if like you all think that that is true in real life, or if that's just like an exaggerated portion. Because like whenever Abuela talks about it, she's not talking about herself. Like she is legitimately thinking about everyone in her family, but collectively, not individually, which I found really just fascinating to think about. I don't know.
Yeah, just to like talk about that, I feel like she also saw her family very much as like community leaders, and she was always emphasizing the community. Like we have to be strong for our Encanto, for our community. And so she probably saw them like not solely as just her family, but made it more, I guess she expanded it to mean all of Encanto, you know, the whole everything. And that just put less emphasis on like the family members individually, which is why she didn't see like the problems, the internal like conflicts that were going on.
That's a really good point that you raise up, because I know there's like one like really small scene in the movie where they're like trying to decide what to do with Antonio's gift. They're like, oh, what is now he gonna do for like the community? So I really do believe that, yeah, like a lot of it just comes from abuela, like having to run away and like having to go through all that trauma. And so she really wants to just like do everything she can to like help her community, like help everybody. And I do think that's very true to Latina communities. I know for me, like a lot of what I'm doing is for my community. Like not only am I a college student, but I'm also involved heavily, like doing a lot of things on campus because I'm doing it for the well-being of the community and just the in that aspect. But also like when I came to college, I felt really guilty being here because I felt like I should have been at home, like helping my family as I've done all my life. And so I think that's a lot of things that a lot of other students or friends that I come across like resonate with, like feeling that guilt of leaving home and like having to abandon your family in the sake of receiving education and all those things. I know for me, like growing up, like I was always like one of the child caretakers in my family, so I was always taking care of my siblings. And so when I left to college, I just was like, who's going to take care of them now? Like, is my mom going to be able to afford these things on her own? Like, is this going to like, and I think that's very true to the movie because they're always thinking of their family before themselves.
Yeah, I mean, from personal experience, I definitely think it's true in real life. Personally, with my family in Colombia, like there's kind of a big line that divides my dad's side and my mom's side. But obviously that doesn't like work in the movie just because because abuela ran away and they don't have anything else. And so they're able to like kind of put everything they have into this one unit to be able to grow it. And I think there's also like a huge pressure on top of abuela because it's like a pressure that she maybe, I don't know if she puts it on herself, but like over time, it's kind of been put on her because, you know, they protect everybody who lives there in El Encanto and they don't want to let them down and they don't want to like appear wrong. And it's kind of in that royal thing that Omar mentioned. But I feel like if maybe we did something that in Latina communities we kind of need is to like kind of forgive ourselves and see ourselves as more human, then what would end up happening is what ended up happening at the end of the movie, which was, you know, instead of people being like, oh my God, you're actually not like these gods and you're just regular people, like they're not going to think that you're bad. They're going to come in and help you, just like the freaking village helped them rebuild their whole house, you know, like, I don't know, just something that I think we should change in the community, I guess.
I think something else to note is that we do live in a capitalistic society. And so a lot of our value doesn't come from our own individuality. It comes from like what we produce. Like, I feel like in my family, like I'm known as like the person that's going to college and stuff. Like that's where my value comes from. My value doesn't come from like, oh, Evelyn, like she's like, this is her personality. Like, no, I'm not known as that. I'm just known for what I produce. So I feel like that's something too to take into consideration is that we do live in a capitalistic society.
Adding to that, I wonder as well, like thinking both of the capitalistic society and then also like the community coming to help in, if the Madrigal family had like internalized that they are the ones with the role to help other people, that they have become basically reluctant to ask for help from others. Because I know like that has kind of been the case for me, in that like I'm kind of been, you know, known in the family as well, similar to Evelyn, of like, oh, he's going to college like out of state as well, like he's doing big things, yada yada, like wow, so strong. But then it's like you get here and then I'm just like, besties, I'm struggling. Like it's constantly an uphill battle, you know. But also it's like I have personally, you know, internalized of like I don't like to ask for help because I have now personally just prided myself on being able to do things on my own, because it's like for majority of what I've done up till now, like it's mainly been me. I've had a ton of support, which it's like I'm realizing more and more each day. But yeah, I don't know, because it's very telling in the movie because all of the family is honestly just very like shocked that, you know, like anyone would be willing to help, kind of similar to what Antonio was saying. So it's like, again, I don't know where I was going with this, but I find it shocking that it's like, these are, you know, these are some of the small details that you don't notice first on, or like if you're not fully part of the community or have these experiences, you could say.
Yeah. So two things that came to mind. Jocelyn, do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead first. I'll go.
Okay. One, I was gonna point, yes, capitalism, especially in America, and like trying to like fit those roles monetarily. So I also connected in the way that I was the one that they pushed to go to school, like, oh, okay, you got it. And then my parents used to joke that, oh yeah, and this is gonna go off to school. She's gonna get a good job, and then she's gonna take care of us. So we don't have to worry about it. She's the child that's gonna make us money. And I was like, I'm going into counseling. I'm not making anybody money. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm gonna help my community, but I'm also like, I'm not gonna be there in that financial way. But also, like, just going off of what was brought up and internalizing that I don't need help because I have to help others is one, probably the biggest reason that I went into psychology and am doing the field that I'm doing now. But two, is something that we even get to see like in a very like minor way when Louisa starts losing her powers, and they're there for the proposal, and they say, oh, how about some music? And then she starts like getting teary-eyed, like, I'll go get the piano, like, it's okay. And you just see her pushing. She has nothing left to give, and yet she still has to keep pushing on because she can't let anybody down. It's just that internalized, I can't ask for help, like, hey, can you help me pick up the piano? My power isn't working right now. Because you can't say what's going on internally. Otherwise, that may reflect badly on you, your family, and like just prove that you, that is her whole self-worth, is literally the line of the song. Pretty sure I'm worthless if I can't be of service. That's the line. But just like that echoing, like a topic that we're all bringing up is like that image of self-worth, and like, I can't do this if I'm not helping everybody, and I can't let anybody know that I'm not doing so great right now because of how that will affect everybody. Anyways, I will get off my tangent and hand it back to Jocelyn.
I was going to say something along like the similar lines, like the reason the Madrigal family was so like surprised when the town came was because they lost their powers, and they were like, okay, so pretty much like kind of echoing like Lisa's own thing, like, I'm worthless if I can't be of service. And so they were like really surprised. But at the end of the day, I feel like if you build enough of a strong community and supportive community, then like any times that you can't produce whatever, whether that's like your normal like happy personality or like actual things like helping people, then like your community can step up, you know? And I feel like that's such an important part of like families, like teaching each other that your worth isn't in like what you can produce and like what you can be on some days and on other days. Like, it's just having to teach that, and that's just like not emphasized today. And I wonder if there's like any other countries or anything that could like that emphasize like individual traits or like individual worth and all that. It just seems so rare.
I guess if we're kind of on the end of this train, I kind of wanted to pivot to some other things that I really wanted to mention about the movie that I think were really good. Unless people want to continue on this, I'm more than fine continuing. Okay. I don't know, I kind of went into the movie with like very low expectations, especially after the trailer, because I kind of had a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth from kind of where Landon kind of dropped the ball within the Heights in some pretty important aspects. And I don't know, I lived in Southeast Asia for a long time, and I have a lot of like Southeast Asian friends. And so when we talked about Raya, a lot of them had, and not a lot of them really liked the movie. And I was just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to keep this low because it's about my country and I don't want to like be disappointed. But when I went into it, I think it was really, really like the part of it that shocked me really the most was the attention to detail. And it was like obviously through the food, through all of the dishes that they ate, the arepas, like the arepas in the movie look exactly like my grandma's arepas. Like, it's like really spot on. And like in the movie, I could like point to my sister and be like, they're having bandeja paisa. they're having, hot chocolate with cheese in it, which is like a very Colombian thing to do. And then like it all kind of like came to fruition in this one amazing scene. It's when oh my god, it's when Antonio like kind of gets his powers and then he leaves, and then like outside of his room all the cracks start appearing, and like she runs into the room, she's like, guys, everything's happening. And then once everyone comes out and sees that there's no cracks, Abuela's like, oh yeah, we need to bring the music back. And then like her dad kind of plays like a tune, and then the music comes back on, but that tune is a real song. It's called En Barranquilla Me Quedo, which is one of the most important songs in Colombian salsa. It's by Joe Arroyo, which is one of the most important salsa guys of like the history of Colombia. And like me and my sister just like exploded in our seats when they played the initial tune, because like it's so recognizable. It's amazing.
I saw like TikToks about like the little details that they do. So there was like the song, of course, and I thought that was like so iconic. Also, like the way that Mirabel like pointed with her lips at one point, she did like a little like, and it's apparently like a very Colombian facial expression, and I thought that was like so cute that they added that in there.
Yeah, another thing too was like when I think it was Mirabel's father, he was like miércoles. Like a lot of the gestures that they do is like very in tune with like Colombian culture. Like I am not Colombian, but I've gone to I went to visit Bogota once as senior year. So like we like ate a lot of like their cuisines and things like that. And like I know there's like if you ever read 100 Years of Solitude, a lot of people like resonate the movie with the book because the author is like a very famous Colombian author, and he's the one that like kind of pioneered magical realism, which is very like, again, like very in tune with the film. So it was just like really nice to like see that representation.
So I just want to say that Jocelyn had to leave for class, but thank you for joining us, Jocelyn, for when you hear this later. Also, those like, I think that with the attention to detail, that speaks to a lot of what we may see in future films that target or try to encompass very specific cultures. So that does give me like some hope that, hey, they're listening to these things. Like you're taking the representation, you need to do it as accurately as you possibly can. And like having those minor details, in contrast to our first episode where we weren't reviewing films or TV shows that were actually meant to represent our communities, but it was such a harsh, like, people don't act like this, or you shouldn't, or you're only seeing it in a negative light. So what we talked about in the last episode that was around the same topic was, what do we want to see in the future? And this encompasses what we want to see. And I really, really hope that we continue to see that in movies and films, in everyday life, where we are fully encompassing these minor details that mean so much to that community. Not to bring it down a little bit, but I know there was a little bit of controversy in how, because I know that even some white individuals who watched the movie, they're like, I didn't like it. It wasn't great. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just specifically just, what do you mean you didn't like it? It's because you didn't get it, or like, because you don't want to be on that high horse, like be like, oh, you don't understand, but also you just don't understand. It was like one of the better movies that have come out, and like I've had friends tell me that, and then had to question our friends just a little bit. But yeah, so anybody's thoughts on like how outside of our people outside of our communities may have viewed the film, and like how that resonates with you as well?
Yeah, I think I was on TikTok. I was on the Encanto side of TikTok for some reason, and there was just like a lot of outbursts because there was a lot of like white people that like just didn't understand the movie. They didn't understand the magic. They didn't understand like the nuances and niches of it. And a lot of people, like a lot of Latina content creators, were just like responding back to them. It's like, you don't understand the culture. You don't understand like where this film is coming from. Like, yeah, like the magic just comes out of nowhere, but that's because like we're like Latina culture overall is very superstitious. Like I think that goes with like Bruno when he's like knocking and like throwing us, like that's like very like super, like we're very superstitious, and we believe a lot in like magic and like a lot of like those, again, magical realist elements. And I think a lot of this shit just like flew over their head. Like they just didn't understand and like grasp that a lot of this is just like has to do with the culture. And they were making it seem like this movie was more about like sexuality representation rather than like generation. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I don't know if you guys have seen that TikTok discourse where a lot of them are just saying that it's about more about sexuality, like, but it's not really. It's more about like generational trauma and like all that. So
Yeah, I actually had this conversation with some of my Colombian friends. People like kind of within white queer circles that they were talking about how Abuela was this terrible person because she was like homophobic and like just not accepting. But it's just they don't understand. Like that's just how the generational trauma that we have, and that's just the way our families like work, and that's why it was so good. Because it was able to reflect that accurately. And it's a lack of context that they have. Like if they don't know what it is, like they're never going to notice that the butterfly in like the vision was from 100 years of solitude. Like you just need to know, and when you're not in the know, you're just not allowed to say stuff, you know. You're not allowed to like have an opinion if you don't know like the background and the context. It's so important.
and the other thing too is like in American society, a lot of it's nuclear families. So it's just like the parents and the children. But a lot of us grew up in multi-generational households where we did grow up close to our grandparents and our cousins and aunts and uncles and things like that. So like we are very much, I would say like a more community-based like society. Like we're more like we care more about our families and like we always prioritize our families. Whereas in American culture, like it's very much like individualized and very much like secluded in that sense.
Just to have been on this because oh my god, sorry, I've also been on the Encanto side of TikTok for about a month now. I still am on Encanto TikTok, but I've seen a lot of those, and I'm just astounded by like just how many people miss the point. I think pretty much Evelyn and Antonio, you both have hit on this topic, but because like in my mind, I like my personal philosophy, like you might agree or disagree, is just like if it is not explicitly said, like if it is not explicitly canon, feel free to theorize. So like let me be clear, for some of these like theories about, you know, sexuality, gender identities, etc., I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like the movie has never explicitly stated anything about any of this, but I think it's like you have to definitely understand first and foremost what the themes of the movie are and who the actual target audience is. Because I have definitely had, you know, a few non-Latina friends who've watched the movie and they have absolutely loved it as well because they have gone through some of the same crap of, you know, different family expectations, different pressures, just like having all of these different roles and just kind of family dynamics. They've understood that because they have gone through it. And so because of that, I've noticed that they have definitely loved this movie far more than others that I have talked to. And I think that is always, you know, especially when it comes to movies like this, I think that's always the biggest thing to know. And I think, Antonio, you also hit this on the head perfectly. Like, if you don't know, don't say anything. Like, I love to consume media and I've seen like a wide range of things. I know that for many times, it is not my place to talk about some shit because I have not gone through it. Like, I can't say anything, you know? But I think a lot of people just don't understand that. And that's why the internet is making people a little too comfortable sometimes in what they say. But yeah, like, again, I think it's just very important to note like what the main message is and who that message was meant for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree, Omar. And then specifically on the topic of sexuality within the characters, if it's not explicitly said, yes, you can build upon it and see, and also possibly see yourself in it as well, as someone who is a part of the queer community as well. Like there's obviously because you're missing a lot of things, and especially of BIPOC LGBT plus characters, you kind of just like want to force it in a little bit of a way. You want to see it, you want to see that representation, and that's something we could build on later. But also, like, it is a possibility. Not to say that it is not. It shouldn't overshadow the themes of the movie. I think you're talking about that perfectly, Omar. It should not overshadow what is actually going on within the community as well. But if you like to see that and you want to theorize, and maybe that's why Isabella didn't want to marry him, or like things like that. But it shouldn't overshadow and like take away, and you shouldn't be, because I think the problem with that amongst white queer individuals is that they're telling Latina people, no, you're wrong. No, that is not your place. Like, you can theorize all you want. That is not your place to say, no, you're wrong. You don't know about your own culture, because that is what the expression that it is spewing in that toxic realm. Yes, getting off of that. If anybody has anything to add, please interrupt me. But I also want to like pose the question, we can continue on this topic as well, but I want to also pose the question and ask if anybody else's family, going off of generational trauma, has seen the movie and what were their thoughts about it, because I have some words for that, but I want to give it to our guest and to Omar as well before.
I can go ahead. So yeah, my mom saw it. We saw it together. I think a lot of it just kind of flew over her head. Like, it wasn't sticking to her. Like, I was kind of laughing because I was like not surprised. Like, I was like, I know this is not going to reveal anything major to you. She was like, yeah, like, value should come from individuality, and that was it. Like, she did not go into depth. She didn't go into generational trauma. She just was like, oh yeah, like, she's like, oh, like, me gustó la película, like, se trata de esto, but she was like, she didn't go into the niches and nuances of it. And I was like, you know what, it's okay. Like, I don't even know how to continue this. I was just like, whatever.
Kind of going off of that, I watched it with my mom. I've watched it with my sister there first, and she got it. I mean, obviously. And then I saw it with my mom, and then my two grandparents and my grand uncle, all Colombian, right? And it was kind of the same thing. Like, they were just like, oh, it was cool. And then like we watched it in Spanish, which, by the way, was really cool because like the doblado was actually with Colombian actors, so you could hear their accents and stuff, which was like pretty cool. But even that went over their heads, like, it's Colombian. Why shouldn't it sound Colombian? And then like the American, it was like, to them, it's more like, it's like this exterior perspective. It's like, oh yeah, the Americans think this is an American movie, America. Like, this, obviously, like, I'm not going to go into a deeper level of this because it's clearly them and not us, you know? So obviously, I mean, it went over their heads. They didn't really develop.
I'm so glad that this is like the universal, like, young person experience watching this movie, because so I mentioned I watched it in the theaters first with some friends, and like from them, all of us got it. But then I told my mom, hey, this is a really, really cool movie. I think you would really like it. So I took her to see it in the theater as well, which, again, I should mention, the short, again, from the beginning, Far From the Tree, was also about generational trauma. And I feel like it's important to know, because my mom mainly speaks Spanish, that short did not have any speaking elements. So it should be universally like recognized, because nothing was speaking, no one was speaking. So it's like, you have to take it from context too. That's the deal. But then definitely throughout the movie, like afterwards, I was like, ¿Qué pensaste? Like, what did you think, Mom? And she was just like, era muy bonita película, me gustó mucho. Gracias, mijo, por llevarme. She was just like, yeah, thanks for taking me. Really nice movie. And that was it. I was like, Mom, come on. Expectations, mental health, generational trauma. Come on, you didn't get any of that from this? Because I know for a fact that like she's only, honestly, I think she's like the second to youngest child out of 9. So she's like, she definitely would not really relate to like Isabela or Luisa or anyone like that. But I definitely think like she, speaking about like roles in the family, she is definitely the one that like some of my other family members rely on. it could be because she's like, she's very independent. I love my mom because of that. But I know that she at least would have resonated to some degree, and maybe she did and just didn't tell me. But I'm just like, Mom, did you not have any deeper thoughts about this? Like, please tell me you have some thoughts other than it was a nice movie. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know. But it was just like, it was very funny to me that like out of these two like different media experiences, you just thought it was nice and cute, you know? Oh my goodness.
To make it 4 out of 4, it also went over my parents' head. In a lot of ways, in some it resonated specifically with my mom. My mom is not a Latina culture. She is a Portuguese culture, but that same mentality of she saw herself as Mirabel and speaking with abuela and seeing her as my great grandmother and their relationship. So she was able to catch like those things, but the overall theme of generational trauma and like how that plays out over her head. My dad as well. So my dad, I was talking to him actually yesterday, telling him about, oh, I'm going to do a podcast tomorrow about the movie. Have you seen it? Did you watch it with Mom? How did it go? Because I didn't watch it with them. And I think also if me and my sister watched it with them, or me and like all of us, if we all got together, I think it would have changed our perspective a little bit, because we are very talkative. And just like, did you see this? Did you point that? Like me and my siblings would have been like all over it, because all of my siblings watched it. And I'll go into a little bit later about us asking each other, who did you see? Who am I to you in this movie? Like, who did you see each other? But my dad specifically, he was just, first he goes, well, you know, it was predictable. And I was like, it was predictable? And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, because also my dad's like not great with his words. And like, he goes, well, I don't want to say it was predictable. He was like, I just didn't enjoy it. And I was like, you didn't enjoy, like, I'm just like asking questions like, you didn't enjoy it? And then he's like, well, no, I really liked it. It was a really good movie. It just, I think I couldn't watch it. And I was like, yeah, because you lived it, Dad. You are the first, like, you're the firstborn of, like, and he was like, and then it clicked. He goes, oh my God, yeah. So I think he gets it now. But he was like, oh, yeah, you're right. I did live it. This is exactly, this is like with grandma, da, 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 da. Like, it had to, like, I had to talk it out with him first, but also I don't know if he like really got it because it was over the phone, or if he was just like, okay, moving on, I don't want to talk about it. But like that could also be a thing where like you don't, because he's not very like open about his feelings and stuff like that, and like that makes sense. He is, it's just not in his wheelhouse. And as someone who is very open about their emotions now, I wasn't back then, but just going in and talking about it from that perspective and like branching out and connecting it for him, he was like, he started to get it a little bit more. And it was just, but that first initial take, way over their heads, didn't catch that.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like if there's anything that Latinos are good at, it's ignoring their own like blatant need for self-improvement and also blaming it on others. Like, because I don't know, with my parents, they've had many opportunities. I was in a production of In the Heights, and I took them, like, they went to see it, and then they were just like, I didn't like it. It was not, you were good, but I didn't like the story. It didn't relate to me, like, por favor, you know, like, I don't know, it's just like a pattern and a repeated behavior that needs a lot of therapy to get fixed. And that's just not something that a lot of people have access to or feel is like legit, you know?
Speaking on that as well, I think that's just like, oh my gosh, this is like getting into even more stuff, but I think it just like feeds into the problem, I think, that mental health in, I mean, basically all BIPOC communities, but I think like, you know, within the Latina community as well, it's just super, super taboo to, number one, talk about your feelings. Number two, like even think about, you know, thinking about your feelings, like actually going through and being like, how am I actually feeling about this? And then number three, like actually seeking help for those issues. Because I know in the past, I've talked to my mom about it, and I'm just like, what if I go to therapy? Like, just what if, and she's like, "Okay." Like, I don't know if her mentality has changed about that because of the pandemic now, but because she has seen me struggle with my mental health. But like when I was younger, she was just like, "Okay, like, you're fine, you can talk to me." I'm like, "Mom, mom, I don't know if that's a good idea." But yeah, like I just find it fascinating that mental health in general is not something, that people even want to talk about, much less actually do talk about. And it's just always been fascinating because now I'm going to therapy now. Which is wild to me. I really never thought I would be in therapy. Imagine that, a Latino in therapy. I'm sorry, but
snaps for Omar for doing that. Snaps for Omar.
But like, I'm not gonna lie, it's been a bit of a nerve-wracking experience because from what I know, I'm the first in my family to even seek out therapy. So it's like, number one, I have run into the problem of I don't know how to look for these mental health services. I don't know how to pay for it because this is all a bunch of stuff that I have been having to figure out on my own. And now that I have found a really good therapist for myself, I am still finding trouble like actually talking to, some of my deeper rooted issues that I, again, have internalized. Like, these are things that I have not, talked about with anyone. So now I'm like very, very hesitant. And I feel like I'm working up to like actually talking through some of this stuff with him, but I'm just like, listen, I don't know you like that right now. Like, let's just talk about school for the moment. I don't feel comfortable telling you about, my entire life story. Like, my daddy issues, that's a problem for another day, okay? And so, but again, like you constantly run into these problems, and I feel like that is another thing that I would, just kind of think into the future, I would very, very much like to see is like, how do we improve access and how do we improve willingness to seek out these mental health services? I went on a whole ass tangent there. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I hope people know. I know you guys can't like see us, but like we're basically like agreeing so much with Omar, like with everything that he just said. I feel like daddy issues are just like very universal for some reason, and then I'll just go back to like how men are just horrible. I think that's it. I was just gonna say, in regards to like mental health, the person that I thought of was Tia Pepa, because she always has to regulate and control her emotions I guess to like help or not help, but basically keep the family, because like her gift is like emotions through like weather. And so they're always like, oh, she's always like, clear skies. Like, she always has to be in like this like always has to produce like sunshine and like rainbows and like happy emotions. But yeah, that's something that I thought about.
I actually real quick would love to add to that very quickly, because I noticed, again, during my various watches of the movie, most of the time, like whenever it's getting a little too extreme, it's always been Abuela who tells her to control it. So when it happened at the dinner table for the proposal scene, Abuela was like, Pepa, watch the clouds. When they were like looking for Antonio, Abuela was like, Pepa, you're thundering again. And she's like, I don't know what you want me to do. So it's like, I noticed it's always Abuela. It's always the other family members, the older family members that are like doing this. Anyway, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just keep it inside, just like, because I think for Peppa's, like, hers is so, it's so outwardly, like you can tell when she's upset, and I think that builds a fear in Abuela, because she's like, hey, you got to keep it under control. What are you doing? People are going to know. They can see that it's a problem. But also, I'm going to go back to what Omar was saying before in like finding a therapist, like the stigmatization of mental health in Latina communities. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I am eventually going to be a Latina counselor. I'm going to be a therapist. And the reason that, and I actually talked about this yesterday, I was interviewed for Santa Clara Magazine to talk about mental health and like the counseling department specifically. Thank you. But
snaps all around.
thank you. But so I was talking about it yesterday, and one of the questions that got brought up is, why do you do what you do? What led you to this? And I was like, everything led me to this. Like, I want to be that face that I didn't get to have. I knew from a very young age that I needed mental health help. But I also knew that I couldn't get it because of financial struggles. I was low income. I was working class. There was no resources within my community because I come from a very conservative part of California. And like, there just wasn't resources to me. And even now I struggle still. Where do I go? How do I pay for this? And I'm 2 years into a grad program where I am surrounded by therapists all the time. And very rarely do I get to see other Latina therapists. And even in my classes, I'm very selective about who I pick for my professors because I need to know that they have a background or are an ally or something that proves to me that they can help me and proves to me that they can help someone who's like me who comes into their office. So there is a couple of Latina identifying individuals within my program that I won for one of the classes I'm taking now. But that goes back to, how do I get into these resources? How do I do this? Because I don't see anybody that looks like me. And I eventually want that to change and be people and have people see, look, there are all these therapists that I have the same identity as me or have very similar issues as me. And then we can go into that branch and then start to decolonize and destigmatize mental health in that way. But yeah, that's a whole other tangent I can go on, but we'll let everybody go on to their thoughts and everything about this, and especially Pepe and her power.
I think something too is like when BIPOC folks do go to white counselors, like white counselors just don't understand like the cultural contexts of a lot of things. Like I saw like this like TikTok where it was like this woman of color, and she's like talking about her experience going to like a white counselor and how like the white counselor is like, oh, just like cut off your family, like just leave your family, like they're toxic. And it's like, no, you don't understand how like family is a pivotal part of our like social and cultural like life. And it's just like a lot, like that's why there's like that urgency of like having more BIPOC representation with like the mental health like realm. And like even here at Santa Clara University with everything that occurred last quarter, like we really do need more BIPOC counselors, like even first gen BIPOC counselors to understand like that first gen experience. And like it's just interesting to like see that whole, I guess, like dynamic.
I really wanted to speak to that because I have like direct like experience with that. My father died last year in like October, and it was like one of the worst experiences that we have ever had. And like through some of the programs that he had at his job, we were very lucky. He had an excellent job. Was like 5 complimentary sessions with a therapist, you know, just to talk about the event. And it was also like a car crash, so pretty traumatic. And I had this white guy, dude, and like this guy, he was good. He was funny. His name was Dr. Feely. So, you know, you'd think that he, you know, would know. But like, and to be honest, he was a pretty good therapist, but like, I did like 4 sessions and I was just like, this isn't doing anything. Like, cause he didn't understand all of the implications that had with the family, you know, like in the middle of the pandemic, the only person who was able to come to the US and kind of help us out was my uncle, which was a whole thing. Cause my grandma, she has like lung emphysema because she smoked her whole life. So she can't get on a plane anymore. And that's just like, so many things that happen. And even today, we're still dealing with a lot of like the family implications that changed. And like kind of a side note, the only way that I was able to get therapy was because my father died. Like, I had been asking my family to go through a therapist for many years, and they met me with the same response as Omar. It's like, ¿para qué? Huh? Tú me puedes hablar. You can talk to me. You can talk to your family. You can talk to your sister. And it just doesn't. It's really sad. My father had to die for me to be able to go to therapy. And now I'm with a Colombian therapist, which is really, really lucky. And it's kind of a combination of factors. When my dad died, there went our health insurance, so she's the only one we can afford. It's like she actually lives in Colombia, so it's a lot more affordable. But I guess the plus side of that is that she is Colombian and she understands all of the family things and what happens, and yeah, it's crazy.
Well, Antonio, I'm going to acknowledge I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry that extreme had to go into why you were able to get help and get therapy when you've been when it's just so looked down and it makes sense as to why it's looked down, especially in BIPOC communities, because it's just a history of being tortured and abused and being thought of as lesser than human. Psychology itself is still working over all the negative, putting people in asylums just because they didn't think the way you wanted them to think, and we are still coming off of all of that. And also, I'm glad that you have a therapist that understands background. And then, because that was another question that got brought up yesterday, was, can white therapists serve BIPOC communities? And I was like, they can, if they do the work, if they're willing to learn and not rely solely on their client to tell them what they need and tell them about their culture. And you need to be working towards it. And I think that's a problem that we see now, is that people think they know everything and they have a very westernized view of everything, so they don't take those into consideration, and they don't even think to. Even in some classes, I have professors where I'm like, hey, maybe think about it in a financial base, in a background base, are you not considering this? And then some are really I have been asked by professors, how do I do better? And I'm like, that's not for me to answer you. You have to that. You can't put that solely on me, because that's also another problem, is that when you're I want to be better, how do I do that? But you can't place it all on that person to educate you. You have to do the work yourself. And I can point you to resources and stuff like that. But other ones are just yeah, that's good. Consider that as well. And then move on to the next step. And I think that's, especially within my program at Santa Clara, as people who I'm seeing who are going to be my future colleagues and therapists, there is a lot of first gen therapists coming in. There are a lot of Latina. There are a lot from a diverse background that are all my friends now. So it's made me hopeful for the future, but also present day, we need to do something about that, because it can't be just at the very last second, you need help, so this is how we're going to do it because you experienced something so traumatic. That's the wrong time to implement therapy if they need it beforehand. But yeah, I can once again soapbox, but yeah, that's a lot of problems that I see within the mental health aspect, and also with understanding why a lot of communities don't trust it as well.
The internet exists. You can learn so much from it on how to better help communities. It's there. You don't have to rely on people. Since we are running kind of near the end of time here, does anyone have any final thoughts on the movie or anything that we might have talked about today?
I don't know why, but I did love the movie, but I felt like it was very short. Did you guys also feel that way? When I watched it, I was like, that's it? That's the end? That was so quick. I'm just scared that they're going to keep reaping. I'm scared that production companies are going to continue to create really quick movies about representation. Because I know Coco was kind of the first Latina one, and that was a huge box office success, and that's how they were able to do Encanto because of what Coco, the reception of Coco and things like that. So I'm just scared that this is just going to be is going to become a trend essentially, where it's just fast producing these movies for representation purposes. But I don't know. That's like one thing. Like that's like one critique I will say. Like moving forward is like hopefully this doesn't become a habit where they're just like reaping money. And another thing too is like in Coco, like it was based on a family, and like like Pixar and Disney never paid this family like recompensation despite like the huge box office success. They never like gave this money like the family money. So hopefully when they were doing their research for Encanto, like they weren't like exploiting people, if that makes sense. So hopefully this doesn't become like a practice, like a continued practice.
I don't know. I think I've definitely noticed that you're saying like as kind of the trend. I feel like you can see it happen. Like I feel like they're just checking the boxes, right? They're gonna like, okay, first, okay. I mean, I feel like the first representation movie was definitely like Black Panther. I think that was one of the first ones that kind of really showed us like, hey, if you acknowledge this community and talk about them, then you can really do something cool. And now they're just kind of going down the list. They're like, okay, Mexicans, and then you got Colombians, and then with Riot, you got Asians, and then like Crazy Rich Asians too. I feel like was kind of a part of that as well. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely feels like they're checking a box, and it's what you were talking about earlier with capitalism. Like there's no capitalism without exploitation. And so that even though they did a really good job with this one, and it's like really nice, like at the end of the day, that is what it is, and that's important to consider when you're watching this. Yeah, I don't know.
It's really interesting to hear you both kind of talk about that as like it being a trend, because I've definitely noticed it too. And kind of also, expanding on our previous episode of, just representation in media, I feel like now that we are in 2022, like we can look back on a full year. I think 2021 was, I don't know what the right word for it is. I was about to say incredible, but I don't know if that's the right term. But it's just like I started noticing that I think especially since near the second half of the year is when theaters more so started opening up. Like we saw in The Heights, which is like one of the like number one biggest Broadway musicals, and then also one of the biggest movies of 2021, and it heavily featured Latina people. Granted, it does have its problems of anti-Blackness amongst other things, which is important to note, but like it's also very interesting that like we got that one. We have Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings from Marvel, which is the first Asian superhero that we've seen. We've also gotten Eternals from Marvel, which is like just interesting to think about because it's like, number one, the diversity of the cast, and then also like it's the first openly gay superhero that like is explicitly openly gay, and like we see them in a relationship with someone else. And so there's that, and then we're like kind of rounding it out with Encanto. But we also had Miles Morales. Was that 2021? But either way, like we're getting so many of these things. At the very least, the next what's it called? The next Into the Spider-Verse movie was announced in 2021. I don't know if that counts. But like, yeah, I feel like we're starting to get this boom. But like it's also, I just very much hope, like kind of speaking to what you both were saying, I just hope that it keeps going, because I'm always fearful, because we keep getting honestly some flops, like Antonio, you mentioned Raya and the Last Dragon from Disney, which was I don't know if I'd call it a flop, but it's like there's definitely some mixed reviews about that one. And so yeah, I'm kind of just interested to see, going forward, how like media progresses towards trying to increase this representation. I think Encanto is just the latest version, and I enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised about how like good of a movie it was. But yeah, I don't know. It's just very interesting to see going into the future how maybe representation is done, and also like how some of the themes from different communities are portrayed, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, to kind of round it all out, Evelyn, your point of how short the movie was, I also was like, also, I think there's only 8 songs, right? It's one of the shorter for a Disney movie. Let me double check, because I was listening to the Spotify. I was listening to it on Spotify before we came in today, and okay, they have more listed that are probably played in like the credits, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's only 7 in the movie. And like that's just it, that as a Disney movie, when Disney heavily involves music in a lot of their films, just points to how where was I going with that, how short the movie was. I don't know if they were just like, we put so much into it, and then they're like, okay, we ran out of stuff, what do we do now? Like, I don't know if that was like the sort of like reason for it, or if they just felt like they could tell the story in a little way. But at some point, I think it did kind of feel abrupt in how it ended, and like I kind of wanted to see a little bit more of like talking to Bruno when he comes back, talking to the, because I feel like the triplets didn't get that the needed like talk that they needed. Like, I'm glad it happened for Mirabel and Abuela, but the immediate kids didn't get to talk about that, and how growing up without a father, and like how that may have impacted them as well, losing their father and growing up with a single mother, and like having these roles. I feel like there could have been a lot more, but I also don't want it to be like, oh, part 2, part 3. Like, I don't want that, because at some point they're gonna mess it up, and they're going to just continue to exploit. And like Antonio said, and what Evelyn was getting to earlier, there is no capitalism without exploitation. But as much as I want the representation, I want them to do it as ethically as possible to do so that we still get that content, but no one is being used to get that content for a mass audience. You know what I mean? Like those sort of things. But yeah, like I said, I also enjoyed the film, but there is a lot of things that we need to be keen on and point out, and also look to for the future and how we consume the media that we do. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to say that you're doing, or like any clubs you're a part of, like any sort of like hyping up for that sort of stuff, or just like hyping your own Instagram? I don't know, whatever you want to do.
Real quick, the music is really good though. I will say that about Encanto. The like Lin-Manuel, like he killed it on this one. Like having like Colombian artists like Carlos Vives and Sebastián Yatra, like I think that was really essential. So enough of that. So yeah, I'm involved. Me and Omar are actually both involved in the Multicultural Center. So come out and check us out and like visit us. I know today actually we're having a talk about like anti-Blackness within like other communities of color. So like come out and check it out. Yeah, I don't know anything. I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
I did have one more thing I wanted to comment on. Kind of a negative, but like whatever. There was one thing that I think bothered me a little bit. It was about kind of the cast, how Stephanie Beatriz was kind of playing Mirabel. And Stephanie Beatriz, like, don't get me wrong, freaking phenomenal actress, like amazing in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I really hope for the best for her. Like, she's literally one of the Latina GOAT like actresses that there exists right now, but she's not Colombian. Like, and that's just a fact. And that's the lead in the production. And then there's also like a long history of like white Argentinians kind of taking over a lot of Latin roles just because they are one of the whiter countries in Latin America. And yeah, and also kind of towards Sebastián Yatra and Carlos Vives, like really cool artists, but there's a lot of Afro-Colombian artists that they could have used, like Chucky Down, like the list goes on. And like Herencia Timbiquí, like a lot of those are like a lot more like core Colombian artists instead of like just reggaeton kind of stuff, which by the way is awesome, but like just more core things.
And then they had Maluma too, and like
yeah,
they just having like these white Colombians, yeah. So
yeah, for sure. But yeah, a really a pleasure to talk to you guys. I had a great time.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, thank you both, or I guess all three of you. We saw Jocelyn, who again had to leave a little bit early. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on to talk. Very much enjoyed it. I think this was I just love Encanto, so I love like just getting the opportunity to talk about the movie. But yeah, like I love just hearing all of your takes, hearing your experiences. It's very much appreciated, and I think it just like adds to, you know, kind of cultural relevance, you could say, that the movie has on the world today. But yeah, that's all I've got, Nissa.
Yeah, I want to also thank our guests for coming on today. It is so great to have that representation and have people talk about their thoughts on it and uh, what was great about it, and also the very real critiques of it. In addition, what is there to promote on RRC and OML sides? I know that tonight we have a 3D. Of course, this will probably not come out until maybe Monday. So it will probably like not be talked about, but just stay in touch with our Instagram, our Facebook page, if you're on Facebook. But just check out our events. We're always coming and promoting different things. Nothing to report as of right now, but once again, this has been the first episode of the new quarter for Word on the Street podcast. Thank you everybody who joined us today.